We all know what it's like to feel really well. Those times when you feel energised, motivated, clear about your goals and in control. But where does that feeling come from? And when we achieve that state, how do we maintain it for as long as possible? A good way to think about it is that the psychological and physical well-being is like the water in a reservoir. In this sense, well-being is dynamic because it is constantly being drained and topped up in various ways. For example, events, circumstances and relationships can all be a drain on your well-being reservoir. They are the cracks in the dam. Things like too much travel, inadequate training or difficult colleagues can drain your psychological well-being. I'm sure you can think of many more things that drain your reservoir. Because there are a host of specific work-related pressures that drain our psychological well-being, business psychologists have divided them into a set of areas that can be used to manage well-being more effectively. Robertson Cooper's asset model provides a framework for exploring and developing well-being at work. This research-based model tells us that the sources of pressure that can drain our well-being reservoir fall into the following themes. Resources and communication, for example, having inadequate training. Control, for example, ideas not being listened to. Workload and work-life balance, so too much travel. Change, for example, if your job is not secure. Work relationships, for example, dealing with difficult colleagues. And sense of purpose, so if you don't have clear goals. Of course, people are differently affected by these factors in terms of what is most likely to drain their reservoir of well-being. The impact of these pressures is likely to depend on their intensity, the individual's personality, plus the support and coping skills that he or she has to draw upon. If left unchecked, each of these sources of pressure and their combined effect can cause a stress reaction. And, unlike pressure, stress is never a good thing. However, it's not possible to design the perfect working or living environment where there aren't any sources that drain our well-being. So it's important to work proactively to repair the cracks in the dam and to avoid long-term exposure to stressful situations as much as possible. Dealing with the root causes of pressure, building your own resilience, and developing sources of support are all important aspects of repairing the cracks in your dam. Of course, like a real reservoir, the well-being reservoir has inflows as well as outflows. In this sense, it's important for each of us to recognise the positive sources that enable our reservoir to be topped up. Replenishing sources vary considerably from person to person and from team to team, but some examples include physical exercise, thinking differently, praise and recognition, challenging and achievable goals, mastering new skills, and social support. As with the draining factors, you will undoubtedly be able to think of others that work for you. For example, you may have a signature strength like confidence that you draw upon when the going gets tough. Again, however, the asset factors can be useful because they provide a framework for thinking about where you can find sources that will enable you to top up your well-being reservoir. Both individuals and their managers share responsibility for keeping the reservoir topped up. It's particularly important that managers are aware of this model because when the workforce as a whole is successful at maintaining high levels of well-being, organisational performance becomes better and more sustainable. Managers must look after their own well-being, but they also need to do what they can to keep the reservoir topped up for their team or area. They can do this by focusing on actively managing the 6 main sources of workplace pressure identified in Robertson Cooper's asset model. Sticking with the reservoir analogy, the aim is to get the balance right between the inflow and the outflow. Damage to psychological well-being occurs when people are living or working, or both, in a situation that does not allow their reservoir of well-being to be maintained and topped up. If the same source of pressure drains the reservoir for a long period of time without respite, there will be a serious negative effect on levels of well-being. Multiply this across a whole workforce, and the effects on the productivity of the organisation are obvious. As individuals, keeping the reservoir topped up helps us to respond more positively to challenges and setbacks. Of course, some people are more resilient than others, and different people's psychological well-being is damaged or enhanced by different things, but no one can go on for too long without replenishing their reservoir. The reservoir concept works at the group level as well. In the case of teams and organisations, keeping the reservoir topped up creates a situation where the group as a whole is able to react more positively to change, work demands and other challenging developments. When each individual feels good, this adds up to more than the sum of its parts in the group, because members have the resources to support each other and keep going themselves when times are tough. Your wellbeing reservoir is an important resource for you to maintain. Work and life events will threaten to drain it, but by actively managing the inflow and outflow, you can create the motivation, strength, and resources to perform effectively and sustainably.